from 4th semester BA LLB to render the invocation song.
ಸಜನರಿಗೆ ಭಯವೂ ಇನ್ಯಾತಕಯ್ಯ ಸಜನರಿಗೆ ಸಂಜೀವರಾಯರ ಸ್ಮರಣೆ ಮಾಡಿದ ಮೇಲೆ ಸಂಜೀವರಾಯರ ಸ್ಮರಣೆ ಮಾಡಿದ ಮೇಲೆ ಸ್ಮರಣೆ ಮಾಡಿದ ಮೇಲೆ ಅಂಜಿಕಿನ್ಯಾತಕಯ್ಯ ಸಜನರಿಗೆ ಭಯವೂ ಇನ್ಯಾತಕಯ್ಯ ಸಜನರಿಗೆ ಕನಸಲಿ ಮನದಲ್ಲಿ ಕಳವಳವಾದರೆ ಕನಸಲಿ ಮನದಲ್ಲಿ ಕಳವಳವಾದರೆ ಹನುಮನ ನೆನೆದರೆ ಹಾರಿ ಹೋಗದೆ ಪಾಪ ಹನುಮನ ನೆನೆದರೆ ಹಾರಿ ಹೋಗದೆ ಪಾಪ ಅಂಜಿಕಿನ್ಯಾತಕಯ್ಯ ಸಜನರಿಗೆ ಭಯವೂ ಇನ್ಯಾತಕಯ್ಯ ಸಜನರಿಗೆ ಪುರಂದರ ವಿಠಲ ಪೂಜೆಯ ಮಾಡುವ ಪುರಂದರ ವಿಠಲ ಪೂಜೆಯ ಮಾಡುವ ಗುರುಮತ್ಮರಾಯರ ಸ್ಮರಣೆ ಮಾಡಿದ ಮೇಲೆ ಅಂಜಿಕಿನ್ಯಾತಕಯ್ಯ ಸಜನರಿಗೆ ಅಂಜಿಕಿನ್ಯಾತಕಯ್ಯ ಸರಿ ಸರಿ ರಿಮ ರಿಮ ದಪ ಮ ಪದ ಪ ಮ ಪ ಅಂಜಿಕಿನ್ಯಾತಕಯ್ಯ ದಪ ಮ ಪರಿ ಮ ಪ ದಪ ಮ ಪರಿ ಮ ಪ ಅಂಜಿಕಿನ್ಯಾತಕಯ್ಯ ಸರಿ ಗರಿ ಸನಿ ದಪ ಮ ಪ ದಪ ಮ ಗರಿ ಸ ಅಂಜಿಕಿನ್ಯಾತಕಯ್ಯ ಸರಿ ಸರಿ ರಿಮ ರಿಮ ದಪ ಮ ಪ ದಪ ಮ ಪ ದಪ ಮ ಪರಿ ಮ ಪ ದಪ ಮ ಪರಿ ಮ ಪ ಸರಿ ಗರಿ ಸನಿ ದಪ ಮ ಪ ದಪ ಮ ಗರಿ ಸ ಅಂಜಿಕಿನ್ಯಾತಕಯ್ಯ 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 ಸಜನರಿಗೆ. Thank you.
Thank you, Gana. Now I would like to invite Professor Tabassum Sultana, Faculty Coordinator of the Center for Gender Justice and Law, to deliver the welcome address.
Thank you, Bhumika. Good morning, all. It is with great pleasure and excitement I stand before you on behalf of Syama University School of Legal Studies, Center for Gender Justice and Law, to welcome you to the book launch of I Kick and I Fly, of an extraordinary individual, a person whose work has captivated audiences and is now set to leave an indelible mark on the literary world. We are here to celebrate the incredible achievements of Professor Ruchira Gupta, an Emmy Award winning documentarian, journalist and professor from New York University. Professor Ruchira's journey in the world of storytelling has been nothing short of remarkable. With a keen eye of detail and unwavering commitment to truth, Professor Ruchira has brought us powerful narratives, earning applause and recognition on the international stage. Today, we gather to witness the next chapter in her career as she unveils her latest creation within the pages of a book. In a world of information, Professor Ruchira's ability to distill complex stories into compelling narratives has set her apart. Her work is a testament to the power of storytelling, the impact of visual narratives, and the importance of shining a light on the untold stories that shape our world. Today's book launch is a culmination of years of dedication, passion, and relentless pursuit of excellence. As we delve into the pages of Professor Ruchira's latest work, we embark on the journey that promises to be as enlightening as it is thought-provoking. The stories within these covers invite us to explore the depth of the human experiences, to confront uncomfortable truths, and to witness the human spirit. Let us take a moment to acknowledge the hard work, creativity, and courage it takes to transition from the visual world to written word. Professor Ruchira's ability to weave a narrative that engages the mind and touches the heart speaks volumes about her versatility as a storyteller. To Professor Ruchira, we extend our hearty congratulations on this momentous occasion. Your work has not entertained and informed, but also has inspired countless individuals around the globe. May this book find its way into the hands of many, sparking conversations, fostering understanding, and leaving the enduring impact on all who read it. Let us celebrate not just the launch of the book, I Kick and I Fly, but the culmination of visionaries' dedication to storytelling. Please join me in welcoming Professor Ruchira to share more about her latest creation and journey that led to this creation. I request our beloved Dean Sir to welcome Professor Ruchira Gupta with a bouquet. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am, for your kind words. Now I would like to invite Ms. C, the student coordinator from 8th semester BALLB, to introduce our chief guest to the audience.
Good morning to everyone present here. I deem it my privilege to have given the opportunity to introduce our speaker for the day. Professor Ruchira Gupta is an Emmy-winning journalist and founder of the anti-sex trafficking NGO Apne Aap that empowers women and girls to exit systems of prostitution. I Kick and I Fly is her debut fiction novel. She has been awarded the French Ordre National du Mérite, the Clinton Global Citizen Award, and the UN NGO CSW Woman of Distinction, among her other honors, for her contribution to the establishment of the UN Trafficking Fund for Survivors, her passage of the US Trafficking Victims Protection Act, and her grassroots activism with Apne Aap. She also holds a Doctor of Humane Letters degree from Smith College. She has co-written a book with Gloria Steinem, namely As If Women Matter, and edited 2 anthologies, Rivers of Flesh and Renu's Letters to Briju Babu. Madam has worked for the United Nations in Nepal, Thailand, Kosovo, Iran, and the USA. She occasionally teaches at the New York University's Center for Global Affairs as a visiting faculty. Professor Ruchira divides her time between New York and Forbesganj, her childhood home in the foothills of Himalayas, where she furthers the work of Apne Aap. I Kick and I Fly is an action-packed, shocking, and triumphant story of courage and freedom. On the outskirts of the red light district in Bihar, 14-year-old Hira is living on borrowed time until her father sells her into the sex trade to repay his loans. When a hostel owner presents her with an opportunity to practice kung fu, she learns that her body isn't an object to be commodified. A competition takes Hira to the US, where she pieces together the whereabouts of her missing best friend and takes the ultimate risk to mount a daring mission. I take this opportunity to welcome you, madam, to this event. At this point, I request the Dean Sir and madam to present the book to the audience. Thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am. A short video will be played now, and ma'am will address the gathering shortly after.
This iconic scene from Teesri Kasam has resonated with many, symbolizing a tragic reality faced by countless women. But what if the narrative could change? In my book, I Kick and I Fly, another Hira stands in the same Mela ground in Forbesganj from the same Nat tribe. Her story unfolds differently.
I am Hira. I am Hira. I'm Hira. I'm Hira. I am Hira.
Each one of these brave girls embodies the spirit of Hira, who declares, "My body belongs to me and no one else. I will kick and fly. I will live a life without fear." Based on true stories from my NGO Apne Aap, this book is more than fiction. It's a testament to resilience, courage, and the fight for freedom. Join me in rewriting narratives and empowering lives. I Kick and I Fly is not just a story, it's a movement. Get your copy of I Kick and I Fly and be a part of this transformative journey. Go to my website ruchiragupta.com and sign my freedom pledge.
Thank you, everyone. Now I would like to invite Professor Ruchira Gupta to deliver the guest lecture on the topic Legal Perspectives on Human Trafficking in her book I Kick and I Fly.
Professor Subramania, Professor Sultana, and students who are all gathered here at CMR University, I am very honored to share my book I Kick and I Fly with all of you and to launch it in Bangalore with a group of students who are already working on human rights law and gender studies. As many of you know, I am a lifelong activist against sex trafficking. My own journey began as a journalist. I was traveling through the hills of Nepal when I came across rows of villages which didn't have any girls. And I was really surprised. The year was 1995. And I couldn't understand how so many girls could be missing in so many villages. So I asked the men who were sitting there drinking tea, playing cards, where the girls were. And they told me, "Don't you know they all are in Mumbai?" I followed the trail and found little girls locked up in tiny rooms for years, some of them on display in cages. I was shocked, I was angry, I was sad, but I was also determined to do something about it. I made a documentary called The Selling of Innocence and ended up winning an Emmy for Outstanding Investigative Journalism. When I was on stage in New York and looking at the bright lights and the applause and an audience just like you all I could see were the eyes of the mothers who had broken their silence and told their stories in my documentary because they wanted a different future for their daughters. In that instance, I decided that I would use my Emmy Award and my documentary not to build a career in journalism, but to make a difference. So I stepped off the stage and I turned to the lady who had given me the award, Donna Shalala. At that time, she was a United States Secretary for Health, which is like a minister for health in America. And I said, "You've given me the award, but can you help me do more? Make me a way so that I can use the award to make real change." And she said, "What do you want?" And I said, connect me to people in the United Nations, connect me to people in the United States Congress and Senate, so that I can talk to them to see how we can create laws which will actually help the most vulnerable, protect the most vulnerable, and end the impunity among the perpetrators and the exploiters. She did connect me to members of the United Nations, and eventually I did go to the UN and show the documentary, The Selling of Innocence, there. And just like I'm talking to all of you, I spoke to 160 delegates who were ambassadors from countries all over the world, asking for a new UN protocol which would end the trafficking of human beings by holding traffickers accountable, by punishing the perpetrators who were buying little girls and little boys and for either labor or sexual exploitation, and also asking for more investment in the most vulnerable women and girls so they would have choices other than sexual exploitation and prostitution. The delegates did hear me, and I'm proud to report that I was able to contribute to the passage of the UN protocol to end trafficking in persons, especially women and children. And subsequently, over the years, more and more countries signed the protocol, ratified the protocol, and today more than 160 countries have changed their laws to meet the standards of the UN protocol. So we actually used the law to change something where the blame shifted from the victim to the perpetrator. I did the same at the US Senate. Donna Shalala introduced me to two senators, a Democrat and a Republican. I worked with them, I went and testified to the US Senate, showed the documentary, and again asked for a similar federal law there. And that today is now known as the Trafficking Victim Protection Act. It took longer in my own country, India, because when I came here and talked about the changes that we require to protect the vulnerable and punish the perpetrators, I would get responses like, oh, prostitution is as old as the hills, aisa hi hota hai. If prostitutes don't exist, girls from good families will be raped, or men will be men. So it took me longer to change the mindset, but we did get a pivotal moment in India where I was able to change this law, and that was, all of you will remember that a girl going home after watching a movie on a bus named Jyoti Singh Pandey was raped and murdered. And that lit a spark which went across India, and there were massive demonstrations for laws which would punish severely those who assaulted women sexually. And so we marched on the streets, survivors from my NGO, Apne Aap, went to Parliament and testified, met leaders of political parties, we did press conferences, went to Burma Commission. And at that time, we were able to play a role in the passage of Section 370 with all its clauses of the Indian Penal Code, which now is the definition of trafficking in India. Not ITPA and not POSCO. It is Section 370 of the Indian Penal Code, for all of you to remember. So this is how we were able to bring about legal change. And of course now, as I mentioned to you, most countries are following the UN protocol to change law. And some best practices have also emerged from that process. But how did I know what kind of a law I wanted? I was just a journalist. And how did I know that to communicate to these powerful people in the US Senate, in the UN and Indian Parliament, I even went and testified to the UN Parliament. The reason I knew that what kind of a law I wanted was because I was in touch with those who were the victims, those who were affected by this inequality, so that there were people like the traffickers who could prey upon their vulnerability. And how did I know that? Because after I made the documentary and after I won the award, I went back to Bombay, to the brothels of Mumbai, and I told the women, I said that, listen, I have told your story. Here's my award, I've broken the silence, I've made your pain visible, now the world will do something about it. But the women said, that's not enough. They said, you've got to do more. And I said, but I'm just a journalist, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not even a social worker. How can I do more? All I know is how to tell the story. So the women said that you have two things. You know English and you have access to money and networks. And I said, yes, I do. So they said that you can help us with, and I agreed. And I asked them, I said, what do you want? They had 4 dreams. They wanted school for their children because they wanted to save their daughters from the same destiny that they had been subjected to. They wanted a room of their own. For many of you who have read Virginia Woolf, you know how important it is for a woman to have a safe space of her own, where she can be herself, think clearly. And of course, in the context of the brothel, it means that, you know, a customer walks in night or day. Sometimes a customer reaches out for the children who are playing on the floor. So a room of her own meant safety. The third thing was the women wanted, the third dream was they wanted a job in an office. Now again, if you saw the brothels of Mumbai, you would know that they were hellholes, you know, chawls down a street, 1 staircase up, 20 rooms to 1 toilet, iron bars on the window, 1 small door, beds jammed together, always the noise of music and fighting and quarrels and crying and smell and sweat and rats on the floor. And in the middle of that, I was thinking, what does a job in an office mean? And really it meant safety, no exploitation, no violence, no beating, fixed monthly income, dignity, old age pension. And in prostitution, of course, there is no dignity because you have to negotiate the price of your body all the time. Also, the old age pension is disease and death. And even if everything else can be legislated away, in prostitution, the one thing which cannot be legislated away is body invasion, because that is what customers are buying. And repeated body invasion means that there are physical and mental health consequences. The physical consequences I don't have to illustrate. After COVID, we know if someone even coughs near us, we feel scared. And we think that we'll catch a cold. But imagine intimate body contact. You know, the women suffer from low intensity fever, they have bruises on their body, they suffer from insomnia because they have to be available for the customer night or day, they have backaches from standing on the streets waiting for the customer. And then on top of that, jaundice, tuberculosis, any diseases that the customer may have, including sexually transmitted diseases. Along with that, there are the mental health consequences. And the mental health consequences, of course, range from a sense of alienation. I don't know if any of you have heard the term out-of-body experience, but many of the women, when they are lying on the bed with a customer on top of them, have an out-of-body experience. They pretend they are not there and they are dreaming of China or looking at the ceiling fan. So they are actually alienated from their bodies. And then that leads to trauma, that leads to anger, depression, suicide attempts, unhappiness, loneliness. It's isolating to go through so much trauma. And now research is showing that women in prostitution are suffering from higher rates of PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, than even returning war veterans. So, you know, a job in an office is based on dignity, but it's also based on being sustainable. Because in prostitution, you are actually dead with disease, and by the time you're 30 or 35, and it's not, you don't earn more as you gain more experience, you earn less as you gain more experience. And the fourth dream that the women had was, they said, punishment of those who have bought us and sold us, punishment of their perpetrators, those who have broken away our dreams. So these 4 dreams became Apne Aap's business plan. Apne Aap means self-action in Hindi. We called our NGO Apne Aap, and we hired a teacher, rented a classroom in the red light district, and began to educate the children for school. Soon enough, when the children were ready for school, we heard the principal in the mainstream school objected. He said, "You won't admit children of prostitutes." So then again, we had to form a self-action circle, Apne Aap Mahila Mandal, go to the principal, beg, cry, cajole, and say, our children too. and the principal relented. And fast forward now, Apne Aap has community classrooms inside community centers across the country, and we have educated more than 3,000 girls from red light areas, not just through school, but school and college, and they have jobs, and we are still continuing. So that is what taught me what I have to do. Listening to the women, working in the grassroots, understanding the needs of the community, and not imposing a top-down law or a policy on the women and girls. And that is very important as we create laws and policies. And through this work at the grassroots, at the policy level, at the United Nations, what we have been able to do is to change the legal framework for victims of sex trafficking. And also we have created a paradigm shift, because now we don't use the word prostitute so easily. You know, we have understood that she is a victim of sex trafficking. When I began working, nobody would use the word sex trafficking 30 years ago. But today everybody does, they know what it is. When I would use the word traffic, they would think it meant red lights and traffic signals and all of that. Not so anymore. So this happened through the movements we began 30 years ago, and I was not alone. Let me tell you this very clearly. I was helped by other activists across the world, other policy makers, other lawyers, other law enforcement officials. We all got together to create this movement which led to this big change. Now you will ask me, what is this big change? What does it mean in terms of law? You know, I told you that we work girl by girl. Apne Aap, my NGO, has helped more than 20,000 women exit systems of prostitution. But working girl by girl was not enough. Of course, we had to work law by law. Because ultimately, for a poor girl who's trapped in a situation of vulnerability, and I call her the last girl. And why do I call her the last girl? I take the concept from Gandhi, where he spoke about the uplift of the last. And he says that any change that you embark upon, remember that you have to think of the weakest, most vulnerable person you know, and if that policy or law will have an impact on that weakest or most vulnerable person you know. So to me, that weakest and most vulnerable person I knew was the 13-year-old in a brothel in Sonagachi in Calcutta, or the 19-year-old in on a street corner in Atlanta in the United States. And why was she the weakest and most vulnerable? Because of intersecting inequalities. All of you are gender studies students, so you know what intersectionality is. So she is poor, she is female, and she's a teenager. Because of that, she cannot control decisions over her life, sometimes even over her body. And on top of that, in India, she's from an oppressed caste or from a marginalized religion, community, tribe. In America, she's black or Native American. In Europe, she's a refugee or from an ethnic minority. Same thing in Africa. So this last girl exists everywhere. And we wanted to create laws which would actually uplift the last girls. So coming back to the UN protocol, how did we create a law which would reach that last? I was very mindful of that. So two things we did. The first is, does everyone know what the UN protocol to end trafficking in persons is? How many of you know it? Two. Okay, so I'll explain. So the UN protocol to end trafficking in persons, which was passed in 2000, basically is the legal framework for countries to change their laws under which those who are victims or at risk to trafficking are decriminalized, which means that they cannot be punished through laws, even if they have said yes, even if they have consented to being trafficked or prostituted. And how did we put that into a legal framework? We said that the burden of proof will not be on the victim. We shifted the burden of proof out of the equation. And we said what we have to look at is abuse of a position of vulnerability in the beings. So the UN protocol, we divided it into three things: act, means, and purpose. So the act is the sale, the purchase, the kidnapping, the harboring, the receipt. These are the acts which a trafficker will follow. The means are force, fraud, coercion, trickery, seduction, but also abuse of a position of vulnerability. So if someone is in a drought-prone area, flooded area, conflict area, just poor, because of all these intersecting inequalities, and is hungry, or is homeless, or is looking for love or shelter or even protection, and a trafficker comes to her and says, oh, I'll take you to Mumbai and sell you, and do you mind? And she says yes. So her vulnerability is being abused. So her saying yes will be considered a survival strategy, but she will still be considered a victim of trafficking in law. So they won't say, oh, she might even pay the trafficker to take her to Mumbai because she thinks this situation where she is in is more dangerous than the situation she will go to. Even then she will be considered a victim of trafficking. So this is how we ended the burden of proof and also the definition of how to define a victim by putting in this clause about choice, and her consent and her choice we said is irrelevant to defining her as a victim of trafficking. So that is the means. And of course the end in act, means and purpose. The purpose was always listed as exploitation. So how did we define exploitation? Because in today's world, very often people will tell you that if she's chosen something, it's not exploitation. We did not use choice as a way to define exploitation. We used harm, inherent harm as a way to define exploitation. So we said if anything which is inherently harmful, physically or mentally, any kind of occupation, then that is considered exploitation. So body invasion obviously is inherently harmful. So therefore sexual exploitation and prostitution and surrogacy and organ trade, all of that came under the definition of exploitation, along with bonded labor, child labor and other such things, right? Cheap labor. So this then became the framework for the UN protocol to end trafficking in persons. And therefore when somebody tells you, oh, she's chosen to do this, it's irrelevant. If she is exploited, the person who has trafficked her will still be held legally accountable and will be punished under the law. So this you must remember as you go along. You all are budding lawyers and you will have a chance to use the protocol on behalf of the most vulnerable in our society. We use the same protocol as the framework for the passage of the US law, the Indian law, the French law, the Norwegian law, the Swedish law, and now it is known as the equality model. Initially it was known as the Nordic model because the first countries to adopt this framework were the Swedish and the Norwegian countries, right? So what did this do? First of all, the UN protocol differentiated trafficking from migration and smuggling. What is the difference between human trafficking, human migration and human smuggling? Does anyone know that? So human migration is just people moving from one place to another, right? Sometimes it is forced. It could be force of circumstances. There may be a war, there may be a natural disaster. So people are moving from one place to another. Sometimes it's just a choice. But the purpose is not exploitation. They may end up being exploited. So that is one big difference between human trafficking as per the legal framework and migration. The purpose is not exploitation. The second thing is that migration will always have movement, right? It's always going to have movement. You have to go from one place to another. Human trafficking does not have to have movement. Remember I told you the act is sale, purchase, kidnapping, harboring and receipt. So a girl could be harbored in the very mud hut that she was born in and put into prostitution in the back room of that mud hut. And she will still be considered a victim of trafficking because her position of vulnerability as a child who's born in that mud hut, in that brothel, she's vulnerable. and the person exploiting her has used that vulnerability to put her into a situation of exploitation. So there is no movement. Migration and trafficking, the two differences are trafficking does not have to have movement, and trafficking is always for the purpose of exploitation. The other difference between smuggling and trafficking, smuggling is just how you are taken across a border, right? It is not for the purpose of exploitation. You may end up being exploited by the smugglers who may keep your document, then it becomes trafficking. But smuggling, it per se, is not exploitation. And same difference with migration. Smuggling will have some movement, trafficking does not have to have it. So based on these things, now we are changing the laws across the country. And as I mentioned to you, the best practice in this law is this equality model based on the UN protocol, where we are shifting the blame from the victim to the perpetrator. And this is very similar to what many of you know since you're a gender studies student, is the laws on domestic violence. If you remember, 20 years ago, 25 years ago, domestic violence was called life. People would say, oh, aisa to hota hi hai, unke ghar ka mamla hai, we can't interfere. Now we know it's a crime. So same thing we are doing with sex trafficking. Sorry, I've got a very bad allergy. So same thing we are doing with sex trafficking. And my book, I Kick and I Fly, is actually based in a community of a tribe known as the Nuts, N-A-T-S. They are a nomadic group who were labeled as criminal tribes under British colonialism. Does anyone know what a criminal tribe is? It's good that you don't know, because that law doesn't exist anymore. It's been denotified. But the British had passed a law called the Criminal Tribe Act to label certain nomadic groups in our country as criminals just because they made and sold and traded in goods which the British wanted to replace with made in England products. So for example, if someone made medicines from forest produce or whatever, the British wanted to replace it with Glaxo. So they called them quacks, and they said they can't sell their medicine. Same thing they did with dairy products, meat or cheese or whatever. They had goats and sheep. They said, no, you can't sell it. We will replace it with Caventers. Same thing with rope bridges or iron utensils. They said, you can't do it. We will replace it with our Scottish engineering firms. And so they were banned from doing so through a law passed in America, calling them criminal tribes for doing these things. They were also banned from moving from one place to another because the British thought they might secretly still sell their products. So they were not allowed to wear shoes or hats or ride on horses, own pakka houses, and they had to report to authorities at midnight and at 4 in the morning. They were also evicted from the forest because the British wanted the forest for the produce for their wars, world wars. So these people became so marginalized that they ended up squatting on government land or on zamindari land, and they had to do the most menial chores for the zamindars or these British authorities. And what that meant was also making the women sexually available. And slowly in such communities, what happened was what is now called intergenerational prostitution. Prostitution passed down from mother to daughter and pimping from father to son. Boys were forced and told that if you want to stay here, you'll have to bring your wife, your daughter, your sister to the zamindar or the British officer. And over a period of times, when India became independent and we denotified this act saying nobody is born a criminal, but the stigma, the marginalization and the discrimination remained, and the people were so cut off from everything that they continued to be trapped in intergenerational prostitution. So my book, I Kick and I Fly, is based in one such community in Bihar, in a small town called Forbisganj on the border of Nepal, which is dirt poor. And it's about a 14-year-old girl called Hira. Hira, as you know, means diamond. So my Hira is a diamond in the dust. She is going to school because her mother does not want her to be sold into prostitution. But her father is working for the local crime overlord and he does want to sell her into prostitution as soon as she attains puberty. And when the cattle fair, there's an annual mela which comes to town, and he wants to sell her then. And the only way out for Hira is to go to school. But one day, she's expelled from school for stealing an egg from the midday meal because she knows her mother's starving, her sister's starving. So she thinks if she takes the egg home, it might help them. And the school bully notices and he teases her and she kicks his teeth and she's expelled from school. So she's sitting and crying when a women's rights advocate enrolls her in a Kung Fu program. And through the practice of Kung Fu, Hira discovers the power of her body and learns to fight for it. Now, how did I find this story? And this is just the first chapter. I'm not going to give the plot away because eventually she deals with kidnappings and complicated family relationships and bullying and body shaming and many other things to unravel an international crime syndicate and rescue her best friend from Queens in New York. So the story begins in Forbesganj and ends in America. And she meets victims of trafficking in America also because it's a universal problem. The United Nations says it's the second largest organized crime in the world. Billions of dollars are made in profit by the sex industry. So this girl is not sure about her destiny. She thinks it's her duty to her family to be sold into prostitution so her mother does not have to starve. Her younger sister Chotu has just died from fever because the roof was leaking and the family didn't have enough money to send her to a doctor. And Hira is already expelled from school. The women's rights advocate tells her, come back to school, I will take you. But Hira feels that she may be challenging her destiny and she should not go back to school. So I'm going to read you an extract from the book where Hira actually has this conversation with her older sister Miradi about not going back to school. What if everyone in Girls Bazaar, Chacha and Baba are right? Did Chotu die because of me? What if I did bring bad luck to the family? I voice my doubts aloud. This grabs Miradi's attention. Since when did you begin to believe in this superstitious nonsense? I don't meet Miradi's eye, focusing instead on Jamila Bua as she fries the onion pakoras for the lunchtime rush. A black crow drives a sparrow away from the garbage. It's a stark reminder that the mightiest will survive, that destiny decides who will be mighty. It's the way of the world, Miradi. If destiny hasn't decided when I was born, who has? It's all a birth lottery, I say bitterly, walking up and down inside our mud hut. Miradi comes and hugs me. She strokes my head. I know you feel frustrated, but do you have a choice? What else can you do but go back to school? I steer the conversation away from destiny. In my heart, I know I don't believe the superstitions, but all the women in our lane believe in the eternal, inescapable fate of our nomadic nut tribe, because they can't imagine anything beyond it. There is no defiant mother or cousin or sister or teacher to fight for them. I decide to spell out my other fear. What if I don't understand everything? There, I said it. I don't want to be the stupidest kid in the class. Miradi looks at me with no expression on her face. Then her brow furrows into a small fold. As far as I remember, you did fine in school, at least when you were a kid. I smiled back. I used to love the dusty library and the smell of books. I used to love the books, Tagore, Sharat Chandra, Mashweta Devi, and the adventure stories, even by the English writers, Enid Blyton and Laura Lee Ho. Words had always come easily to me. Then came the hunger, the bullying, the chores at home, my first menstruation. Everything slipped away. I can't study if no one is there to help me. Can't you help me, Miradi? Do you think I remember anything after the hell I've lived through these past few years? There's an aggressive edge to Miradi's voice. I see a small, warm spark of hope fight the fear in her eyes. under her clumsy makeup is a desperate appeal. I look at her and remember her full-throated and happy laugh as a girl. I will overcome my fears for her. I will fight for my future, for the dreams that she could never make come true for herself. Outside, the sky is grey, the sun sending out weak rays through the mist. Far off, a train whistle blows. I give Meeradi's hand a squeeze. I promise I will go meet Rinidhi. Meeradi smiles again. I will send word to Rinidhi that you will go to her tomorrow, she says, as she ties a dupatta around her head. Her body language changes. She stiffens, drawing in her shoulders as she walks away. Selfishly, perhaps, I realize that I'm not just doing this for her. I want to be a person. I want to kick and fly. I want to win. I want to have the courage, like Rinidhi, to demand a life without fear. And now I'm open to questions and interaction.
Having a mic. Okay, while you all are deciding about your questions, I'll just read you one more extract about how Hira practices Kung Fu. The instructions begin. Left, right, press your thighs, back straight, shoulder down, breathe deeply. As I relax down into what I think is the horse stance, Rinidhi comes and straightens my back. Don't push your chest inward, Rinidhi shows me. All power in Kung Fu comes from the ground. I try to feel the pull of the earth. I embrace gravity, letting it connect with my body. Somehow it's more natural than I could have ever imagined. Something happens. My body loosens up and lets go. I open up my shoulders instead of slouching over my breasts in shame. I inhale deeply into my expanded lungs. I think of when I felt like fighting in the past, how the tension in my body seemed to swallow me. I wasn't in control then, but now I feel as light as air. The gravity centers me, the earth carries me. The day's anxieties don't exist. The earth has absorbed them. I feel as though I can move my body in any direction. We move to the forward stance. Rinidhi shows us how to shift our weight onto the front leg. We bend the front knee, our back leg straight towards the side like a drawn bow. By the time we finish the cat stance, the twist and the crane stance, I'm exhausted. I can feel every muscle ache, every pore breathe. The shame, the guilt and the fear that have been embedded in every cell of my body seem to have seeped out of me. I have always hated my body, my breasts and hips, the parts of me that gave me away. They mark me out for the fair in Ravi Lala's eyes. I push my shoulders back and open up my chest without fear. I am calm, though my heartbeat is loud. For the first time, it seems, I notice different parts of my body. Finally, Rinidhi says, relax. Remember, Kung Fu is not just about physical strength. It's about channeling your energy, or chi, to use your strength effectively. The more you practice, the more you train your mind and body to work together. The more you will reach the highest stage of Kung Fu, a state of complete mindfulness. What does that mean, Asadaf? It means your body and mind will connect. They will guide you together. You will choose to listen to both unitedly. If a power is stronger than you, you will become flexible and let the stronger power spend its energy out on itself rather than on you. We nod and mull over those words. she leaves us with a final thought. You cannot be powerful all the time, or you will break. You cannot be flexible all the time, or you will lose direction. Be like water. Flow, don't crash. That's what Bruce Lee said. I bow to Sifu Rini, then in all four directions of the Kun. I will flow, not crash. Namaste.
Good morning, ma'am. I have a question, ma'am. So basically, protection of these people by law authorities and by other stakeholders is definitely important, ma'am. But then, ma'am, as a system, how do you think?
Excuse me, can everyone keep quiet? So when he's speaking, I can hear him. Otherwise, it's very difficult if you all whisper. And can you stand up and talk and keep the mic a little bit away from you?
Thank you. Ma'am, what I was asking was protection by legal authorities and other stakeholders, ma'am, to these people. Of course, ma'am, that is on one hand, ma'am, but on the other hand, as a system, how do you think we can give better education to young people in a structured manner so that they can protect themselves and they have an awareness, ma'am? So basically, ma'am, like what you were talking about, self-defense aspect, and also, ma'am, other concepts of consent and awareness, ma'am, so that they are not lured. And what's your perspective, ma'am? Thank you.
Education is very, very crucial and almost vital, I would say, to a girl from a vulnerable community or a marginalized caste to escape being preyed upon by traffickers, because it is the only way she can build a better future for herself and also have the knowledge and the power to fight back if somebody is trying to seduce her, trick her, kidnap her. And therefore, the connection of vulnerable girls to education is very key. And this is where policy comes into play. We have education policies, we have legal frameworks. What we need to do is to make sure that that policy, that education policy is targeted and reaches the most vulnerable. So for example, there are denotified tribes, like the tribe that I describe in my book, I Kick and I Fly. Very often the girls from those tribes don't go to school. No one in the entire community ever in 150 years. And they don't have the self-confidence, the knowledge, or even the know-how, how to go to school. And unless the policymaker creates a mechanism to reach that last girl, to make sure that she can get to school, and along with school creates an environment, an ecosystem for her, that if she goes to school, she goes with a full stomach, she has 2 sets of clothes, she has legal protection so that traffickers do not try to kidnap her and other things. So you need to create a whole ecosystem, and so it's not just one policy, you have to make a convergence of many policies for those last girls to go to school and get an education. So yes, education is vital, and along with education, legal protection is very, very necessary. Because, for example, where Apne Aap works inside the red light areas, when we began our community classrooms, we got pushback from the traffickers, right? So they would beat up the mothers and say, why are you sending your daughters to school? When we started a girls' hostel, they would actually come inside our hostel and kidnap the girls and lock them up in rooms. And that is how I started the karate and kung fu programs in my own NGO. Because I thought, even if these girls are kidnapped or beaten up, at least they can kick the teeth of the traffickers a few times in self-defense. And we had to make the walls of the hostel go higher, we had to work to change laws, we had to do police training across the country. I wrote manuals for prosecutors and law enforcement officers on how to use the law to protect the vulnerable and punish the perpetrators. Stop using the law to round up the women, but use the law to round up the sex buyers and the traffickers. So you need a combination of legal protection and education to help such communities. Yes, there's a girl in the back in the white.
Good afternoon, ma'am. So, ma'am, my question is basically, hello. So, ma'am, my question is about the legalization of sex work in India. What is your stance on it? And with the follow-up situation that I have heard one podcast in which one police officer was sharing her experience when she went on for an investigation for the SB Road, Mumbai, which is a very huge sex like red light area. So what she's saying was, when there are rooms for the sex worker, they also have ways through the roof. So when the police officer entered to room number 1, they moved the girls through the roof to other room. So when in a country where sex work is given the position of a profession, how can we actually fight against it? So when it was illegal, the dalals were still able to do human trafficking. Now when it is legal, how can we fight against it?
Very good question, actually. So first of all, in India, as per section 370 of the Indian Penal Code, an adult woman can sell her body for sex and she cannot be punished for it. But sex with a minor is considered sex trafficking. It's not considered sex work. So if anyone tells you that, that's wrong. That's not true. Legally, that is human trafficking. If you have sex with a minor, it's also rape, right? Under the rape laws. So in most of the brothels in India, the girls who are kept are underage girls, and in the front they will keep the adult women, in the back they will hide the little girls, right? So what we have to do is to make sure how do we reach that last girl, the little girls inside the brothels, and get them out. And sometimes they're hidden in attics or false tunnels, etc. You will see that in my documentary also. So you have to have the police investigate and take the police along to have these investigations and seal the brothels forever if such things are found. And we did that in Mumbai's Kamtipura area. We got many brothels sealed as a result of this. The second thing is that in India, also you must understand that sex work, there's no such thing. There's no legal term called sex work. Yeah? And also in the UN, there is no such thing as sex work. It's not, there's no such legal term. It's just a language which is used by people in the sex industry and the allies who want to legalize pimping and brothel keeping. Who do they want to benefit when they say sex work? Who does it benefit really? It benefits the pimp who is the sex worker. He's selling sexual exploitation. It is him and the brothel keepers, right? So there is no such thing as sex work because it is based on body invasion. And something which is inherently harmful to the body cannot be considered work. It is called exploitation. Even in mining, when we go inside a mine, we have laws which say a person should not crawl, they should walk straight. Because we believe in the dignity of the human being, right? Same thing with prostituted women, we believe in her dignity. So we cannot sterilize the exploitation being done to her or gaslighted. All of you who are gender studies students must know the word gaslighting. So they are saying that we are being exploited, we want services, we want legal help, we want childcare, we want this and that. And yet we are saying, no, this is work and you are enjoying it and this is your choice. So we are actually gaslighting the poorest and the most vulnerable of women by saying they want to be sex workers. These are survival strategies. It doesn't mean that they are not being exploited. And there is no legal framework for that. So I don't use the term sex worker at all. I use the term prostituted woman or prostituted child to make people understand that there is either individual force or the force of circumstances behind what happened to the woman or the child. And I don't use the word prostitute because maybe there is some stigma around it, and of course other words also which people use. And globally there is a big survivor-led movement in which also they are saying do not use the word sex worker, use the word prostituted woman, prostituted child. There is a hashtag called no such thing, which is about no such thing as a child prostitute, right? So we have to understand what is at stake here when we use the word sex worker. There are people who want us to sterilize the exploitation because words have consequences. So I appeal to all of you in the room that do not use the word sex worker, use the term prostituted woman or prostituted child, because as budding lawyers you will have to enforce the law on behalf of not the sex industry but the most vulnerable girl or woman. And it is very troubling when public health people who are working on AIDS will come and tell you, let's ignore the beatings and the violence inside the brothels. You know, the pimps and brothel keepers are our allies, you know, and let's just call them sex workers so that we can get condoms inside the brothels and ignore what is going on to the woman or girl. What does that do? It protects the male buyer from disease rather than protecting the women and girls from the male buyer.
Good morning. As you were reading some excerpts from your book, I had two observations. One, you have referred to terms like chi and namaste, which is very prominent when we create spiritual awareness among people. So my first question would be, do you think, along with education, spiritual awareness can help combat the vulnerability in those who are prone to exploitation?
I'm not sure if it can help combat, but I think, you know, sometimes some kind of centering of your inner energy can help you heal and stand up for yourself, which is why for me, you know, Bruce Lee is like this sort of philosophical, spiritual figure who's telling her center your chi and, you know, be mindful of your body and all of that. So for me, I have offered Bruce Lee as that kind of a figure. Of course, there is conversations also between Hira, my 14-year-old girl, and her brother Salman, where they say that if this is happening to us, does God exist? And then Salman tells her that, you know, God is in the universe. He's everywhere, in the twigs, in the clouds, in the sky. And, you know, we can find our own God. It can be a goddess. And we can create our own destiny if we figure it out, how to find a connection within ourselves. But it cannot be the only thing because, you know, for Hira, she needs a stomach full to be able to walk to school, to be able to concentrate on class. So basic needs are her human rights, and then there is the spiritual element. So it's a combination of all of these things.
Now, and another thing is, of late, if you see, traffickers come in the guise of lovers, of relatives and well-wishers. So what do you think can be the mechanism which can be invoked? Because generally what happens is, whatever is on the face is not true. The person may come very politely to you and say, come take a chocolate, I'm giving you a chocolate and kidnap you as well.
Yeah.
There are possibilities. So my question is, what type of mechanism can be brought in so as to help a woman who is at the verge of getting exploited? What mechanism can be brought about to prevent the same so that she can identify the devil in the human society?
Yeah. So one is of course the law, right? We have, remember I described to you the act, means and purpose. In the means we put seduction, trickery also. So if someone is coming in the guise of a lover or an employer and then exploiting the woman, we have that in the law to punish him. But the other thing that we have to do is create huge awareness campaigns. So showing movies like this, sharing books like this, all of this can be very useful for a girl or a woman to equip herself with the knowledge that this can happen and how can I protect myself. And one thing for all of you to know about, because you know all of us, young people, face bullying. How many people have faced bullying in their lives? Come on guys, I'm sure guys you can be men enough to put your hands up, have the courage, you know, to admit it. So everyone has faced some form of bullying in their life. How many people have faced body shaming in their lives? What is body shaming? You're too fat, too thin, too tall, too short, too white, too black, not male enough, not feminine enough, right? Everyone has faced body shaming in their lives. How many people have faced sexual abuse in their lives? I won't ask you to put your hands up. But most people have faced small or big acts of sexual abuse in their lives, right? Not sex trafficking. Hira's story is extreme in the third person. But what you can do is find answers by using Hira as a method to discuss these situations among yourselves. And once you find the courage to discuss these uncomfortable topics, which are prevalent in all teenagers, all young people, then you will be able to stand up for a Hira more easily. And therefore you might find out that you are not alone, you are not crazy, the system is crazy, and collectively you can take on
a system which feels pushing the status quo.
Thank you so much, ma'am. That was really a thoughtful and eye-opening speech. On that note, I would like to invite our Dean, Professor Dr. T. R. Subramania, sir, to address the gathering.
Professor Ruchira Gupta and dear students and our professors. Just one or two things I just intend to bring home. While delivering a lecture, somebody asked me, from where did this law originate? And later it became a rule of international law. Now you have heard with rapt attention about what Madam spoke. Naturally, for every problem, the law has to originate from the domestic sphere. And it originates, remember, due to the effort and the commitment of a particular person taking place in the society. And the pressure that is being put is in such a way it is being put, and the nation naturally realizes that it is very much essential to have a law on this subject. And then it goes out of the frontiers of the concerned state. When it reaches outside the frontiers of the state, similar opinion is being generated by this person, or along with this person there will be several others, and it will be generated and becomes a law in that country. Then all of them come together and they need to have a law at the international level. That is the story of the protocol which we have heard till thus far. This is one aspect which I just wanted to tell them. I just made a mention when a question is asked. Remember, most of the laws which are part of rule of law today at the international level and which are considered as customary rule of international law had its origin in the domestic sphere. It had its origin in the municipal sphere. How it originated is the answer for today's lecture. That is what I just wanted to point out. The second thing is, one instance I just wanted to give. Now, in Calcutta, between the frontiers, the borderline between Bangladesh as well as the state of India, you have more than 2,500 to 3,000 kilometers. Now, in this border, naturally, lot of activities take place. You remember only about smuggling, but then smuggling of women is the highest thing that is taking place there. Now, in one of the researches that took place in the National Law School, NLJS, in Calcutta, we wanted to study and to find out a solution to the problem. But then when we started thinking about it, somebody came and told me, sir, it is not worth pursuing the matter because your life will be in danger. Because most of these operations are conducted by mafias. And you get the information from certain NGOs, and having taken the information from NGOs, then you can plunge into the action if possible. There is also uncertainty at every level. This is what Madam has explained, how this is being done. See, the first thing is, it is an action research. You have to involve yourself, take the assistance of agencies, pursue them. Then whatever is required, you should have a questionnaire and you should have an agenda. What should be done? With what purpose you have gone? All of them have to be realized with the support of the people. Then only it can be done. Madam, the university is really honored with your lecture, and we are grateful to you for accepting the invitation and for being with us. And everyone has enjoyed, because most of the students generally listen to lectures on pure law, and at times it is dry, and most of the time it is boring. And if they don't cite the cases, remember, at times the listeners are dead for 40 minutes. And this was really wonderful all of them have come to know what exactly is taking place in society and what should be done to have a better future for these people. Thank you very much.